Hello. Hey everybody. Happy Wednesday, right? The sorry, let me make sure I'm on the right place. Okay. And I am. All right. See, I was saying that the holiday threw me off in more ways than one. So hopefully you all had a restful weekend, or, your weekend was full of honoring the people in your lives who you felt led to honor for Memorial Day. I am excited to be back with y'all this week on both Instagram and LinkedIn, if you recall. And this topic is one that is very special to me because it not only applies to me in a sense, but it also applies to one of the students who's currently going through the Health Professionals to Health Writers program. And I think that this is going to be a topic that's especially relevant for a lot of the medical writers out there who may have started following my account earlier this year / towards the end of last year, when I was creating a lot of content about medical writing and the different types of medical writing that exist, right? So what we did early on in the year was we took a look at what medical writing is, and I offered my perspective juxtaposing medical writing against health writing, and not just talking about some of the more traditional types of medical writing that as health professionals we are probably more familiar with, but kind of diving a little bit deeper into that field and exploring more topics that could be considered health writing rather than medical writing, or, depending on how you look at it, could be seen as a type of medical writing. And when I was creating a lot of that content, I started to get a lot of questions, comments about how I made that transition into health content writing, having been a medical writer earlier on in my career. And I mentioned in the post for today that one of my current students going through the Health Professionals to Health Writers program is actually a medical writer. She writes for a public health agency, and her reasons for wanting to pivot from that space into health content writing are actually very similar to my own reasons for wanting to make that pivot. So I'm not going to blast all of her business. That is her story to tell, but I can speak from my perspective because our experience, our backgrounds are similar, and our reasons for wanting to pivot were also similar. So I can first give a little bit of background information for anyone who has not heard my story. I started out my career knowing that I wanted to use writing as a way to bridge my pharmacy training, my pharmacy background with public health, right? I really wanted to work in public health. That was my goal. I thought that I was going to work at the CDC and then stay there for the rest of my life. That was my dream. And I knew that I was going to use writing as the skill that would allow me to use my background and apply that knowledge to public health. And so a lot of the programs, fellowships, internships, et cetera, that I did were very writing oriented. So after I graduated from pharmacy school, I did a postgraduate fellowship that spanned across a couple of different settings. So I spent a portion of that fellowship teaching drug information and literature evaluation at Purdue University. At the same time, my practice site was Indiana University Health in their drug information center. So that was a hospital / health system based drug information center. Another portion of that fellowship was spent in the medical information department at Janssen Scientific Affairs, which is the pharmaceutical arm of Johnson & Johnson. So that was my training, very formal drug information, primarily creating content that was directed towards a health professional audience. I did not at that time have experience, or I guess I should say didn't have at that time knowledge of opportunities to create health content for the general public as opposed to health professional audiences. And so after that fellowship, I completed another fellowship at the CDC, which was actually an ORISE fellowship. And that one was in health communications. And in that role is when the world of health comms kind of opened itself up to me. And I noticed that the writing that I was able to do in that role allowed for a lot more creativity than the writing that I was able to do in the more drug information, medical information focused roles. So that was how the world of health communications opened up to me. And then after that, I learned about health content marketing, which I realized not only allowed for even more creativity than the health comms role did, but was something that I was able to do on a more flexible basis. So there was more flexibility, there was more autonomy, and there was more variety. So I'm a person who gets bored kind of easily. I like to be working on a hodgepodge of projects rather than working on one thing at one time or in one subject at one time. And so with health content marketing, I realized that, hey, as I'm working with different clients, if I feel like I want to, write more in this space, I can add on another client. Or if I want to do X, I can just go find a client that I can do X for, and I can combine that all into something that's a little more diverse. So that was kind of how those different worlds opened up themselves to me. But I wanted to make sure that I was doing what I could to spread the word about those areas, because I think for fellow healthcare providers, we are very familiar with medical writing. We're reading journals all day, analyzing literature all the time, but we're not as aware of health content marketing opportunities. And beyond that, because we're not aware of them, we are not as knowledgeable about how we can enter that space and add value to it. So that was kind of a long introduction, but the thesis statement here is that I made that transition, right? My current student is making that transition. The difference between me and my current student is that it took me that process that I just described to you, from medical writing to health comms to health content marketing, that process took me about 2.5 to 3 years. The transition is taking her about 8 weeks. She's currently enrolled in the program. The program is 12 weeks long. They are entering their 9th week right now, and she has already booked work as a health content writer. So I want to emphasize the point that you can also make that transition, and you can totally do it on your own terms. And so what I'm going to talk about today is the steps that I took and the steps that my student is currently taking in order to make that transition, so that you can apply those to your situation and you can figure out how to make that work for you as well. I do want to mention, though, that this is a little different because in a lot of cases, I'm speaking with fellow health professionals who do not have a writing background, who do not have writing experience. If you are a medical writer who's tuning into this, you do have writing experience. You have a writing background. So there are 3 advantages that you already have because you are already a medical writer that I kind of want to highlight for you. The first advantage is that you already understand the basic rules of writing. So sometimes if you're not a writer, it can be kind of odd to think about the fact that not everyone knows how to write just from a standard like writing process, like putting words on paper, making a cohesive sentence, building that into a cohesive paragraph, determining the flow of a piece of content or an article, choosing the right words, making sure that your point is coming across clearly. I think that as writers, that's something that we take for granted. We think that everyone has the same ability to do that, and that is not necessarily the case. So an advantage for you is that as a medical writer, you already have that basic understanding of the rules of writing, and you pretty much know how to write. The second advantage is that you're used to researching medical information and then synthesizing it. In a lot of cases, we are looking at tens and tens of articles per day, hundreds of articles per month, and we are distilling that information into something that is usable for the audience. Now, that audience for you as a medical writer is probably usually another health professional or healthcare provider. So the audience with health content writing in a lot of cases is different, but still the skill of being able to look at a scientific publication, to look at a peer-reviewed journal article and extract the salient points from it, distill it into a piece of content that can deliver that same information, but in a more targeted way, that is a skill. And you already have that skill as a medical writer. So that's 2 check marks for you already. And then the third thing is that you are probably used to adhering to formatting and style rules. So if you are submitting pieces to journals or to online publications or really anywhere, there are probably certain stylistic rules and formatting rules that you have to follow in order to even be eligible for your content to be published or to be received. And so in the content marketing world, there are also formatting and style rules that you follow. And so your ability already to do that is another advantage for you. So those are the things that you already have going yourself, plus the fact that most of you tuning in are probably health professionals because, right, I talk to fellow healthcare providers about health content writing. So most of you are probably healthcare providers or health professionals. And so in addition to those 3 advantages I just mentioned, you also have all the advantages that you have as a health professional who is writing in the medical and health space. You have a background that makes you more marketable and more credible as a writer in this field because you've been trained in this field, you have experience in this field, you have education in this field. So in addition to those 3 advantages I just talked about, you also have the advantage of being a health professional, right? You're ahead of the game. It's a good place to be. You already have a lot of things working in your favor when it comes to making a transition into health content marketing. However, right, you're not all the way there yet. It's not 100% taken care of. There are still a few things that kind of exist in that gap between where you are and where you would need to be as a health content writer. So in terms of the things that you still would have to learn, it's pretty much the same things as everyone else, right? It's a lot of figuring out how does what you know already, what you can do already as a medical writer, how does that translate to health content writing? And a lot of those things are intuitive and you can figure them out. Some of them are not as intuitive. Some of them, it's helpful to have some guidance and some direction in bridging that gap. So we're going to talk about those individual steps that my student is taking to bridge that gap for herself, the steps that I took to bridge that gap for myself, in hopes that, again, you can take those steps and apply them to your own situation and bridge that gap if you need to. So let's take a water break for a second. And we can go ahead and jump into those 5 steps that I mentioned that are going to help you bridge that gap. Okay, so the first thing that you have to do is you have to do some learning. And when I say learning, I'm not talking about learning in a particular therapeutic area. I'm talking about learning more about health communications and health content marketing in a broader sense. A lot of what you know now as a medical writer is very specific to medical writing, and even maybe specific if there is a type of medical writing that you do more than others. So let's say, for example, you're a regulatory writer. You probably know a lot about regulatory affairs, various regulations that pharmaceutical and biotech companies have to adhere to. You might know a lot about the guidelines, but importantly, you also know a lot about the style of regulatory writing. You know how to write a piece of content that is regulatory in nature because that's what you do all the time. The rules of health content marketing are not the same as they are for other types of medical writing. So what you're going to have to learn about is what are the differentiating factors between medical writing and health content marketing that you have to adapt to so that you can create valuable health content that's not specific to medical writing, but is specific to health content marketing. Once you learn those things, then you're able to apply your writing skills to that new niche, and then you're able to kind of go from there. But it does take some learning in the beginning to figure out what are the areas that I'm not as skilled in right now as a more formal medical writer, and what are the things that I need to learn about this new style of writing that are going to help me in that space. So once you kind of do that foundational learning, the second step is to figure out what area, whether that's a therapeutic area, whether that is an area in terms of the types of health companies you're writing for, what area do you want to write in? This is often a space of exploration, of trial and error, because you might not necessarily know what type of company you would want to write for, or what type of therapeutic area you would want to create content about. It's possible that you don't want to choose a specific area at all. You are more than welcome to go that route. However, my recommendation, especially to people who are not well established in the health content writing field, my recommendation is usually to pick a smaller niche within health content to kind of build your expertise so that you become known for something, so that you are perceived as an expert in that specific content area, because people are then more likely to want to work with you. People are more likely to want you to write for them if they know that you're an expert in this particular area. Maybe as a medical writer, you already have a therapeutic area that you've been in. Maybe it's oncology, maybe it's geriatrics, maybe it's sexual health. And so maybe you just translate that same therapeutic area over to health content writing, but there's no requirement for you to do that. If you want to explore a new therapeutic area, then you're more than welcome to. If you don't want to choose a specific therapeutic area at all, that's also an option. You can choose your specific segment of the market based on the type of health company. So you could say, I don't care what therapeutic area I write about, but I really want to write for compounding pharmacies, or I really want to create content for health companies that deal with diabetes, or health companies that serve pediatric patients, right? So there are different ways you can pick what segment of the market you want to focus on, but that is the second step that I think is really important so that you build a strong foundation in the health content writing space. So after you, and that's kind of an ongoing process, right? That's not like a one and done step. That's something that goes on for years until you figure out like where you feel that you are contributing best. The third thing though, is to have a proof of concept. You know that you can write as a medical writer. And I trust that if you're a medical writer, you can also write. That doesn't necessarily mean that when you are looking for people who you want to write for, that they are going to automatically trust that you can write as well. And so you need some type of proof of concept, some type of sample that you can provide to those prospects and display your writing ability. And your style of writing, because maybe they do trust that you can write, but they want to see, are you going to be able to adapt to the style of our brand? If you're used to writing for, I don't know, let's say the FDA, and then Geico wants you to write for them, that's a different style. If McDonald's wants you to write for them, that's a different style of writing. It's not all created equal. And some people are able to adapt their writing styles more easily than others. So when you're thinking about being able to provide a proof of concept, being able to provide writing samples, what I did when I was making the transition from medical writing to health content writing, I used a lot of the medical writing that I had done as my sample And I just crossed my fingers and hoped that these people would believe that I could alter my writing style and write something that was a little bit more down to earth. The thing that I also did, though, was I created content on my own that I could also use to supplement that. So I couldn't say, oh yeah, I published this article on the top 5 allergy medications for XYZ company. I couldn't say that because I didn't, but I could say I wrote this article on the top 5 medications for top 5 allergy medications, and here's how it turned out. And that worked out well for me. So I think that as a medical writer, you have to think about how you prove that you can write. And you also have to think about creative ways that you can get experience in health content writing as opposed to medical writing. So once you start to get some of those samples underway, the next thing that you do is you think about what kinds of packages you want to offer. So this is another trial. A lot of this is trial and error and happens over time. So in terms of the packages that you want to offer, that means like how much content are you writing for a company per month? Can you do 1 blog post? Can you do 4 blog posts? Can you do 8 blog posts? A lot of that depends on your lifestyle. It depends on whether you have a full-time job. It depends on, what you have going on at home. Do you have kids? Do you have a second job? Do you just enjoy going out to happy hours and you just don't have that much time to dedicate to health content writing? You have to think about all those things so that you can determine what you can offer to a client and then how much you're going to charge for that offer. And then the final step in the transition is gearing up and getting your energy and your tenacity up so that you can go out and pitch your ideal clients, right? The people that you said, oh, this is the type of company I want to write for, or this is the therapeutic area I want to write about. Who are the prospects? Who are the companies who you would be able to create that type of content for? And then you have to go out to them and you have to say, hey, here's what I can do. Here's what I can offer. Do you want to work together? And when you're first starting out, you have to do that a lot because people aren't going to be able to come to you if they don't know what you do. And if you haven't been already doing it for clients, then you're not going to be able to demonstrate that you do this unless you go to them and you say, hey, here's what I offer. So these are kind of the 5 steps that I think are most important in that transition if you're trying to move from being a medical writer to a health content writer, and some of the things that you have to think about. Again, this whole process, those 5 steps that I described, that took me 2.5 years to get to that point. So again, I want to reemphasize that these are not like one and done steps. These are things that take time. But if you have kind of a structured process to go through to take each of those steps, then it's not something that takes as long. As I said, it took me 2.5 years. It's taking my current student 8 weeks. She's starting to work with clients now, and she started the program in April. My other student, it's a 12-week program. So if you are thinking about how you can apply this same transition to your situation, making that pivot from medical writer to health content writer, following these steps is going to be the key for you. And in terms of, how long you want it to take to make that transition, that's also a decision that is in your wheelhouse. You could take these steps right now, walk away with them, and you'll be able to follow the same pattern. Alternatively, we could work together in the Health Professionals to Health Writers program, and I can help you make that transition as well. But either way, the steps work, and I just want to reemphasize that it's 100% possible to make that transition as long as you are intentional about it. So if you have more questions about the specific steps that I took or that my student is taking, or you just want to talk more about health writing, feel free to shoot me a message. As always, if you're catching this live or on the replay, you know that you can leave comments and I'll be able to get back to you. And otherwise, I think I will see you all next Wednesday at 7:30. So y'all take care.